Hello, and welcome to Hillwood Estate Museum and Gardens. In this podcast, we're going to explore Marjorie Merriweather Post's dressing room, an intimate space adjacent to her bedroom on the second floor of the mansion. You can probably imagine what Mrs. Post's public life was like as the hostess of Hillwood, from the elegant rooms on the first floor. But the dressing room is unique because it is a place where her personal and public lives were intertwined. The dressing room is a small, oval room next to Mrs. Post's bedroom, bathroom, and closets. What's the most striking feature of the room? Some people think it's the bay window behind the writing desk that looks out over her favorite garden. The wall coverings, the carpets, and the delicate furniture reflect her exquisite taste for French decorative arts. So, how do we know this is a personal space? For one thing, the walls are covered with photos of her parents, her children, and her grandchildren. Where do you keep family photos? Hillwood was Mrs. Post's primary home from 1958 to 1973, and this room reflects her life during this busy period. This dressing room was an intimate place for Mrs. Post to eat breakfast, dress, visit with close business and personal friends, and interact with her household staff. As you listen to Estella Chen, curator of American Material Culture and historian at Hillwood, talk about the dressing room, think about what it must have been like for Mrs. Post to live and work here.
The room has a nice, bright quality to it in terms of light and how it reflects the enjoyment of the decorative arts, but also you have to look at the relationship of the interior to the exterior. So when you look out, you see French gardens. That it was a very deliberate design choice of how she wanted to experience that space. When you're at the dressing table, you can really imagine that as a place where Mrs. Post spends the bulk of her morning with key people like her secretary around her. You can imagine a flurry of pieces of correspondence coming in and out of that room throughout the day. Things like this would happen in what you consider a lovely grooming space, but there was an epicenter of business activity, philanthropic activity, family activity that was coming from this room. You see family photographs, and you see hairbrushes, and you see her writing desk.
Do you have a home office? Mrs. Post was an accomplished businesswoman who used this room for work. Seated at the writing desk, she conferred with many philanthropic organizations, from the National Symphony to the Boy Scouts of America, and oversaw the management of her multiple properties, including Hillwood, Mar-a-Lago in Florida, and Camp Topridge in New York. She also served on the board of directors of the General Foods Corporation.
Quite often she would be receiving sample products straight off the General Foods production line. One day a beautiful purple box arrived here at Hillwood, and she was very excited because she thought, well, perhaps it was a nice piece of jewelry from someone who adored her a great deal. She opens up the box, and there is the first jar of Maxim off the production line of General Foods Corporation.
It's interesting to know that Mrs. Post reviewed groundbreaking products here at Hillwood, like Maxim, which was launched by General Foods in 1964 as the first American brand of freeze-dried coffee. So we know that Mrs. Post used the dressing room for business. What else do you think she did here? As Estella Chung tells us next, she often visited with family, good friends, trusted staff, and special guests. The intimate nature of the dressing room provided an opportunity for informal and friendly interaction.
So, if you can imagine, if you were, for example, Mrs. Post's hairdresser, you would meet her up in that room. Perhaps, depending on the time of the day, you would be invited to share in a cup of tea or a cup of coffee on a lovely piece of porcelain, because remember, the porcelain in this house was used as a regular coffee cup or a tea cup. And if Mrs. Post was in a particularly jovial mood, you might be invited to try on, for example, a crown and see yourself as part of royalty. And she loved to spoil people in this way.
This brings us to the end of our visit to Mrs. Post's dressing room. Now that you know more about how she used this room, how do you see Mrs. Post differently? We've tried to paint an intimate portrait of Mrs. Post, so you can compare it with her public persona, so clearly visible elsewhere in the mansion. The legacy of Mrs. Post is one of success and wealth, combined with concern for the comfort and well-being of others. She had an eagerness to share the fun and excitement of the objects in her collections. We hope that her legacy lingers with you, like her favorite fragrance that you'll notice when you're standing in the room.